I spent a solid weekend a few years ago immersed in my computer, fueled by copious amounts of ephedra and coffee, and generally not sleeping much. Every so often, I felt an itch on my arms, as if a loose hair had fallen on them. I'd brush it off and return to staring at the screen. As the itching grew more persistent, I began to wonder if I was imagining things or spiraling into delusion from the tea and insomnia. But then I noticed what seemed to be tiny spiders on my arms. Am I going crazy? Are these drug-induced hallucinations? I turned back to the screen, but now I saw thin strings of webs glistening in the light and tiny spiders floating just past my vision. They were real indeed. A hole in the ceiling caught my attention, where they appeared to be falling from. I unleashed a can of wasp spray into the hole, and hundreds of these little spiders began pouring out, streaming down from their webs. Hundreds of them, all over me. One night, I got home late from work and walked out to my front stoop, only to walk right into a massive spider web. At first, I didn't think much of it until I looked down and saw about 20 or 30 baby spiders all over me. Panic surged through me, and then I spotted the parents perched on my door. They were enormous, nearly the size of my hand. Naturally, I didn't want to use the front door. I sprinted to the back, stripped off all my clothes, and jumped in the shower. I watched in horror as more spiders tumbled out of my hair. Another time, late one night, my phone was nearly dead. I always plugged it into the outlet under my bed. Exhausted, I collapsed onto my bed and reached beneath it to find my phone's charger. But instead, I encountered a squishy sack. I began poking and squeezing it when, suddenly, I felt hundreds of tiny legs crawling up my arm. I jerked my arm back and screamed as I saw probably 30 baby spiders scuttling up my skin. I shook them off, told my parents, and jumped in the shower. It turned out to be a sack of baby spiders, with an even larger mother spider lurking under my bed. That night, I awoke from a deep sleep, feeling something large crawling around in my bed. Still half asleep, I leaped out and began to panic, assuming it was a spider. In one swift motion of bravery, I flung the covers off but found nothing there. I began to think I was just imagining it, perhaps a remnant of a dream, and eventually settled back to sleep. The next night, I felt the same sensation again, this time on my arms. Still not fully awake, I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room to get my dad. He was never afraid of spiders. He came to my room and tossed off the sheets, revealing nothing. At this point, I was convinced it was something related to my dreams, or that something was wrong with me because there was no spider in my bed at all. However, the very next night, the feeling returned. The sensation of something huge crawling on my arm. In a state of half-awareness, I leaped from my bed once more and flung off the covers, only to be met by the sight of the largest spider I had ever seen, even bigger than a tarantula. It quickly scurried under the bed and out of sight as I screamed and raced to tell my dad. This all occurred while I was staying with my grandma for the weekend. My uncle still lived with her, and sometimes I would visit to help him out for some extra pay. After a long day's work with my uncle, I was utterly exhausted and collapsed into the rickety old guest bed upstairs. I flicked on the TV for about 10 minutes before deciding to go to sleep. It was a hot night, and you know how you have to constantly flip over your pillow to find the cooler side? When I did that and laid my head back down, instead of the soft cushion of the pillow, I felt a furry, indescribable object pressing against my face. I shot up in alarm and saw a massive, full-grown huntsman spider sitting right on my pillow. I fell to the opposite side of the bed, and the shaking must have startled it because it took off at lightning speed. Where it went, I have no idea. I'm fairly certain the thing is still somewhere in my grandma's house.